Hello, dearest darlings of the millennium. I'm here to speak on my free speech platform and talk about what's going on for me, which is, it's right now September 15th, 2013, and I'd say roughly since April this year, there's been an escalation in the inquiry process and the conscious process in terms of inquiry, primarily, what am I always doing? And in this process of noticing, what am I always doing? There's a permission or a space to feel what's reality for you at that moment, including feelings of stress, feelings of collapse, feelings of anticipation of collapse, and dread and worry, doubt, guilt, and fear. And these are noticed in the frontal line as you do the conductivity practice of feeling breathing down the frontal line and inviting Bhagavan before your heart and from infinitely above, and just being always open and receptive through the frontal line via the breath. While this inquiry is taking place, what am I always doing? And feeling any of the knots that are in the frontal line. And then noticing how objects, once they appear in your concern, like, oh, I've got to pay that bill, or I've got to drive the car, or I've got to go have a conversation with someone and deal with them, deal with people, creates an object, and in that moment of that object coming into existence, there's a reaction in the form of the self position occurring as a reflection of the object, because the self arises as a problem-solving mechanism to deal with the fact that now there's always stress of separateness because the object has appeared, and all the reaction formation that is associated with any specific object in your historical inventory of reactivity, reaction formation, and forms of reaction that are characteristic of your patterning. So, while you're doing the inquiry, what am I always doing? You're noticing, well, I have this form of reactivity to that form of mortal shock or stimuli, such as paying a bill, driving the car, talking to people, etc. Each time these incidents, an object is formed, the object of concern, a problem needs to be solved. The problem is the core stress. So noticing and allowing core stress in the midst of my reactivity and my collapse. So I'm noticing all this process in, just following Bhagavan's teaching in the areas of conductivity and the conscious process and inquiry and name invocation, and finding that as a result of this practice, that steadily and since the last 5 months or so, that I've experienced almost no state of collapse that was convincing. There's 2 or 3 times in that period where I started to, get a flash of the fearful contraction, reactivity combined with that sense, it's just a slippery slope towards, what is it? The anticipation of collapse. This is one of my great realizations and breakthroughs, that since you always have the anticipation of future death to use as leverage for the anticipation of collapse, you anticipate that there's going to be a death event in your future for yourself or your loved ones that is going to be precipitate a great collapse in your life. You're going to think that's going to be a big, sorrowful collapse sometime in the future because of the inevitable death of oneself or loved ones. And therefore, you've always got fuel for a kind of slippery slope towards an anticipation of an ultimate collapse. Because, hey man, when you're dying or somebody you love the most dies, isn't that going to be a good justification for the big collapse? And a big bad feeling that you're going to feel because of that event in the future? You've always got reason and fuel to entertain an ultimate collapse in your near future and use that fear of a big collapse in the future to precipitate an endless flow of lesser collapses of fear and worry, guilt and doubt and unhappiness and the self-manufacturing of bad feeling. So I noticed this in myself. Praise Adida, thank you, beloved Bhagavan, because of your, not just your instruction, but his presence enables me to tolerate constant, daily, moment-to-moment inquiry into, what are you always doing? What am I always doing? There's permission, there's space, there's consciousness right there in that inquiry to allow reality and how it feels in this moment with all of your feelings, whatever they may be. You have permission to feel and sense and allow them, while noticing a particular fact that even though you have ample justification for a slippery slope towards one degree of collapse or another due to the imminence of death of you and your loved ones, I just want you to consider doing this practice with Adida of inquiry, conscious process, and conductivity, and see where it leads, because what if you can inquire directly into your core stress while basically having the Guru holding your hand? His divine presence is constantly all-pervading, and you can constantly resort to him in his physical bodily form. There's no ambiguity about the physical relationship with Adida. You're breathing him, feeling him, invoking him, and serving him bodily every moment. Isn't that great? I mean, look at me. Look at this happiness radiance. Stupid happiness. And you people just don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know who you're dealing with. And I get to be on the front lines of sharing this unreasonable love and happiness that is, going to ruin your life. Ruin your little egoic delusion of self-glorification, survival, self-gratification, self-interest. Green smoothie. So, there's a message from our sponsor. So, unreasonable joy and happiness. I just wanted to do a little shout out to Santosha Ma here. I see you, I feel you, I love you. You are direct inspiration right now. Your very presence on this planet is giving boundless positive opportunity for beings. Thank you. Santosha Tantra. So, having gained permission and license to do this inquiry in Adidas Company, I found out for myself. So far, an 80% reduction in fear, worry, guilt, and doubt. I mean, my doubt is way down. Let me just tell you, I'm probably the person on the planet right now with the least confusion and uncertainty about what to do, what we should do, what is necessary to be done. And that's why I drafted this recent letter called the Grand Plan. It's like we need to just get the biggest plan together. Specifically for the turnabout of Adidam and all the tie-ins to the Global Cooperative Forum that make that a symbiotic and necessary process, but that's for a different rant. Right now I just want to focus on this inquiry process connected to the conscious process of inquiry, such as, what am I always doing? And the moment of inquiry in Adida's presence allows this great allowance of the stress and the noticing that due to the anticipation of collapse, I was always manufacturing a rationale, justification for the manufacturing of new bad feeling. Like, I could just make bad feeling for myself at a moment's notice, on the whim, based on a whole, litany of pre-patterned reaction formations to thoughts in the mind and experiences in the so-called world. Triggering a cascade of bad feeling that is always on a slippery slope, or you might say a kind of ramp of even escalation towards the ultimate collapse. And the ultimate collapse is basically the thing that everybody is crawling their way out of, trying to avoid, trying to escape, and yet the mind is a big suck of self-contracted ego and infinite ramifications of action, reaction, and reactivity formation to stimuli and phenomena of immortal nature. Everything in your mortal life, everything in human life, everything in ordinary life reminds you of the big suck, of the ultimate collapse. And its inevitability, as long as you subscribe to the premise of egoic separateness, which is the act of self-contraction, which is, I've realized, the self-manufactured bad feeling based on the presumption that future death necessarily requires ultimate collapse and some big sorrow, some big collapse that is catastrophic, and that all of human life leading up to the worst moment is an anticipation of collapse, and every smaller problem in life is something that triggers a recollection of the underlying, as yet unresolved, self-contraction and anticipation of collapse. So, given Bhagavan's instruction and presence and process of inquiry and right life practices, I am heartily here to report to you people that I'm the happiest, least confused, and most ordinary, stupidly happy persons, and I'm intimately in love and communion with Adida, above and beyond all other human relationships. I'm a renunciate, spiritual, second congregation devotee of Adida. I just want to clarify one thing. I meant to say renunciate devotee with groupies.